Well, hello, everyone. My name is John Desjarlais. I am the Executive Director of the Indigenous Resource Network, and you're listening to the Indigenous Voices in Resource Development podcast. So today I have the honor of being joined by Mr. Roger Lewis, who I understand is the Superintendent of Special Projects for the
Nch'Kay.
Nch'Kay. I knew I should have went for that. It was there. It was right there. Nch'Kay Development Corporation, which is the economic development arm for the Squamish First Nation, of where Roger lives, and is a member of the Squamish First Nations. So thank you, Roger. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for coming to Squamish, our beautiful town. Having a beautiful day here. Got some weather cooperating with us.
Right, absolutely. So yeah, I heard from someone say that it's a little cold here today. I was like, I just jumped on a plane where it was -20. It's pretty damn nice. I was sweating when I got here, so it's quite nice. So no, it's always, I was here recently and it's absolutely gorgeous. And so, and with that, I would like to acknowledge, that we appreciate being a guest on the Squamish territory. And so with that, give you that acknowledgement. So thank you. One of the intent is to, of course, talk to, Indigenous people in resource development, but it's really important that we understand the relational context, right? And so with that, tell us a little bit more about, Roger. Tell us a little bit about, your kinship, your network, your ties, your community where you're from, and who you are as an incredible Indigenous role model.
Yeah, so I guess I could start off by kind of talking about how I got my foot in the door in logging. So let's say started in 1999.
Good year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
25 years experience now.
Wow.
Started out just helping my father, Paul, and my uncle Earl with some heli logging.
Yeah.
And we're flying around helicopters. I was just mainly out there helping pack gear, saw gas and tools and whatnot, and just getting, broken into walking around on the terrain.
Yeah.
So heli logging is obviously steep ground.
No kidding.
Not accessible by road. So that was my first little taste of logging. Pretty much stuck summer jobs throughout high school, helping my dad, my uncles with whatever was needed. And then after high school, I did a bit of college. Wasn't really for me. I was interested in a few different things, but the opportunity came back for logging. So that's been my main focus since then. And so I started out as a grounds guy, basically setting chokers, running chainsaw, and then from there progressed up the ladder, running different types of equipment. So like excavator, skidder, that's like cable and grapple skidder.
Yeah.
So different types of equipment there, and then moving up to loaderman. So that's when you're in a log loader and actually swinging logs to the landing process and then loading onto the logging truck.
Yeah.
So that's what I've done previously, like prior to my position now. And I was mainly a woods foreman, managing the crews and all the equipment, different things. Squamish Forestry, it's a company I actually work for in operations, core Nch'Kay. I started out in 2014 with Squamish.
Yeah.
And for about 7-8 years, I was the lead guy for our operations and operating equipment. And then 2020, Squamish Forestry decided to take a pause from operations. So unfortunately, everybody was let go, and we got severance pay and some employment opportunities.
Yeah.
So that was kind of pretty tough, like especially with COVID starting.
Yeah, no kidding.
And from there, I was kind of debating: do I go into a new industry or do I just stick it out with forestry? So I stuck it out with forestry. became a bit of an entrepreneur, started my own logging company, Superior Contracting, and everything kind of just fell in place. I have a woodlot on the reserve that I harvest from. I met some log brokers who have international customers in China, Korea, Japan, Vietnam. So I started logging on my cut blocks under my own contracting company and exporting hardwoods and softwoods to different countries in the world.
Yeah.
So, that was a pretty cool experience.
No kidding.
And a bit of a change from loading logging trucks to 40-foot sea can containers. So you can imagine, not much room for error there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's super cool. Like, and it's especially exciting because I mean, you started, with a really an entry level experience, and then grew into full on entrepreneurial experience, where you're also supporting operations. And there's several aspects to that I'd like to jump into. But I want to come back to that question, and then I heard quite often, and again, like I think I'm captivated by the area and territory. Come back to that question. Tell me something I think a lot of people don't know about Squamish First Nation, or the territory, right?
So I'd say like Squamish as the town was built on forestry. The logging aspects. Also, we had many different sawmills. And also a pulp mill. So industry built this town, and everything was basically named after logging companies, after loggers, stuff like that. Everybody's parents, grandparents were playing some part in the industry. So I'd say that's the background of Squamish, the town itself. As far as Squamish Nation,
even just that Squamish, like that's something that I've just learned, right, in terms of how you proper enunciate, the actual the tribal nation name, right, or the individual or the First Nation name, the Indigenous community name versus the town name, right, and so I think that's really cool. That in itself is something I'm sure a lot of people don't know, right? I know, like for me, I was invited to speak, in a territory that I've never spoken in before, and deliver a keynote. And one of the things, and I think land acknowledgements are very useful, especially in their cultural and historical context. I was an Indigenous person. I went to someone else's territory. I was an uninvited guest, and I spoke, but I took it upon myself to learn a little bit about that. And one of that was the proper enunciation of that community, its name, and some of its language, and a little bit of its customs. And I gave that and I shared that, what I've learned in regards to some of that, cultural context or whatever, right? So I think that's pretty neat in itself. Coming back to that experience, and you talked about, and there's the two ties there, which are exciting. You talked about your growth as an incredible role model in the forestry industry, but you also talked about how this community, how the town was built, and it being a logging town. So, and then, one of the more specific questions is, and I think you talked a little bit about it, but, I want to dive deeper into that intent. Why forestry? Why the forestry industry? As an Indigenous person with whatever opportunities you have, why that industry? What compelled you and then continues to keep you engaged in an industry for, more than 20 years?
So I'd say, just to start with being outside, it's very grounding. It's very positive atmosphere. I do like forestry. You're very independent. A lot of the times you're working on your own. You just go, show up, you do your job. You do work with other people. But it's not like working with the public in an indoor setting type thing. I have tried different industries, different trades. I've done an apprenticeship in electrical, and I've done some security for the Olympics and stuff like that. All cool experiences. But I've always been drawn back to forestry, logging. I enjoy it. It's not a job for me. It's more like getting up and doing what I liked.
Yeah.
Whether I'm working for my employer or for myself, or just getting out there and doing what I like, being out on the land. I would say I'm a steward of the land, so I care a lot about the environment, and managing and maintaining, taking care of our territory.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what's drawn me into this position, opposed to running my own logging company.
Yeah.
So providing opportunities for other Indigenous people for training to bring new and existing workers into this sector. So I think that's been majority of what's kept me interested in forestry and logging. It's just I enjoy the work. We where we harvest, it's different cut blocks, we call them. So they're different harvesting areas, and we kind of shift around. One day we might be, next to the Sea to Sky Highway, and another, 2 weeks later we might be on top of a mountain, 60 kilometers away. So it's very refreshing to have different views, different perspective, and different areas, getting to know the lands and everything. And just a great opportunity to work with great mentors and other experienced contractors.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. And there's a lot to unpack there, there's a lot of cool things. But, I think back to that initial and starting your journey, tell us about, that industry facilitated skills development. Is there any training or anything, any programs or anything that you felt helped facilitate your journey as you grew as a very competent and capable person in the forestry industry?
Not too many for as far as training programs, but like I mentioned, my mentors that I've had over the years, and I speak for myself and other Indigenous workers that I've worked alongside.
Yeah,
we've had great mentors just training us, showing us, being patient and understanding, just being totally new, thrown into a machine. It's, I guess you could see it as you either get a mentor who's impatient and rushing you and maybe getting frustrated, but that wasn't the case for me. And I really appreciate all of the people that have trained and shown me things over the years, and I really value that, and I'd like to pass a lot of that knowledge to other new workers as well.
Oh, that's inspirational, and we'll talk. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. I think we talked about the industry. You talked about some of those opportunities, and what were some of the things that really come to mind in terms of the highlights? What are, if you could pick one or two things in terms of your experience that really stand out, what would they be?
I think the first day I ever stepped into a helicopter at 12 years old and got my foot in the door in logging, that would be the first.
Yeah.
Most of my friends at that age were working at McDonald's and various other places, so I thought that was pretty exciting and a pretty cool experience at that time, and even to this day. The second one I would highlight is loading my first logging truck.
Yeah.
So that alone it's a pretty difficult thing to learn.
Yeah, no kidding.
Not only just to do it safely, but efficient, keeping up production, and then also just the skill involved, not taking care, not wrecking equipment. And then the third I would say would be starting my own company. Sending that first container to China, and then having repeated business. And then lastly, being recruited by Nch'Kay to come and help manage Squamish forestry to start it back up and try and bring back the workers that were laid off. Some found other employment, and some have returned, and we're looking to expand on that and build capacity.
No, it's really exciting. I was just thinking, you talked about some of my early employment experience. One of the things that Indigenous people are also, in addition to forestry, forest firefighting and protection and management, I got to do some wildland firefighting when I was young. And that was my first experience in a helicopter as well, too. I don't know, 18 years old and flying and everything. And I thought I could see why a lot of people, you're out in your land and you're part of, preservation and everything like that, right? And so it's an incredible experience. And I'm not too sure if I've probably only been in a helicopter a couple times since, but yeah, I could see, having cool transforming experience would be really cool. The other thing, we talk about, the IRN talks about what we say good. We advocate for good. But I think we take these opportunities to hear and to inform our perspective on what good is, to gain your perspective on what good is. So, some of the things we like to ask, and, briefly, could you tell me what does good look like in Indigenous recruitment in the forestry sector? So if you're to recruit Indigenous people, what does good look like?
Good looks like being able to provide consistent and steady work with a competitive rate.
Yeah.
So like good wage. Logging is seasonal.
Yeah.
Majority of the time.
Yeah.
And that kind of fluctuates depending on when fire season comes. So that's when fire season comes, it's kind of a halt to operations, and that's usually, it could be as early as May, could be June, July, and then it's usually a slow down until August or September.
Yeah. So
it's try to find different ways to fill in that downtime from logging. So like in the past, like you mentioned, there's firefighting, there's tree planting, there's the silviculture aspect. So there's different things that we can do. So it's just a matter of setting things up for when one thing slows down, we can ramp it up in a different area.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's something I remember sitting down and then discussing with an elder, and we were talking about like role models and things like that. But what really resonated is he talked about we always talk to our chief and council or our Métis leaders or Inuit leaders or whatever leaders. We say we want jobs for our people. He's like we can't. We don't need jobs. What we need is livelihood. Our people are dealing with so much. They need good, consistent pay. Just what you said. They need a good paying job, and they need to count on that so that they can provide for their families and start to deal with a lot of that historical aspects and trauma and stuff like that. So I think that's an important message that people need to hear. Is it's not just important for all Canadians. It's especially important for Indigenous people, because if we can provide that to Indigenous families, then at least they have a better fighting chance at challenging some of those, internal traumas and things and family issues back at home. So, awesome. That is certainly, I wholeheartedly agree what good recruitment looks like. So, I'm sure this is related to the second one. What about like retention? What do you think? What is good retention? So you recruit Indigenous people, you pay them well, you pay them consistently, but you want to keep them engaged. What does good retention look like from your perspective?
Basically what I've done, just an opportunity to rise up into different positions to grow within the company. I think that's most important.
Absolutely. That's another thing. I remember, speaking to, another, someone I considered a role model, but, they said that if and I think you're a perfect example of that. You can, if you present those opportunities, Indigenous people would consider them more openly because they could see that growth through your success, right? As Indigenous leaders build Indigenous leaders at rates greater than anyone else. And so, because we can identify and relate with, their experiences, and then we can move through those things. So if we can promise and deliver on growth opportunities, that's the big thing. I think, in society, I think we expect people to just gravitate and grow. If we create a position of a superintendent, all of a sudden, the best person win or whatever, and just expect Indigenous people will just go there, right? But it's not happening. And, there's this big issue in society. Society says, well, maybe they just don't have the skills. But there's a different thing happening where people are more understanding of the challenges that, equity deserving groups that are faced with trying to get to those opportunities. But Indigenous people creating opportunities for Indigenous people is building capacity at rates, greater than anywhere I've ever seen. So, another great example of what good looks like through retention. I'm sure this is very relevant in regards to, good Indigenous involvement in resource development. What does good look like from a procurement and business development perspective? So procurement, business to business, or, proponent or developer to business. What does good look like from an Indigenous perspective?
I think just being able to be hands-on in the management of the resources, having a say, not just kind of being on the sideline.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's the situation for some other nations.
Yeah.
They're kind of just there, and they're just more of an administrative, like taking a small percentage on top of the work. So I think being more hands-on, having a say, being able to make changes when they're needed, and also putting your foot down and saying, no, we'd like to do it a different way than what's been done previously. So that's kind of where I feel my role comes in is like I know the contractors, I know the industry, I know the workers, I know a lot of, from over the years, the history and working forestry and Squamish. So I think that's, I think back to like what you're saying about being able to grow and being offered this position as like superintendent. Just being able to show other Indigenous workers that it is possible to be a boots on the ground guy and work your way up into management. Like for me, I've never had any type of management experience or work like this before, where you're kind of juggling the business aspect, being in meetings in the office settings, and then also being able to be out in the field on the land and just overseeing all the operations.
No, that's incredibly exciting. And so, good engagement, Indigenous participation involved in a lot of that decision making, supply chain decision making, everything like that is incredibly important. Do you have any thoughts on, I guess this kind of leads into, procurement and business development is usually policy driven. What about from the public perspective? Do you feel, what does good look like from a public policy or government to, industry or government to community? Do you have any thoughts on what good looks like from that regard? Have you ever come across, some type of policy directive or decision or implementation that impacts, your organization, your community? I felt this could have been done differently or better.
Like I said, this is all pretty new on the business side for me, but what I've experienced in the past and seeing some of the changes that have been implemented nowadays. For example, a lot of the clear cuts that were taken out back in the early 70s, 80s, that's not the case nowadays. It's more, we have riparian zones, which is like areas next to water sources, so streams, rivers. We have a lot of protected areas for, wildlife, grizzly bears, moose habitat, mountain goat range. And so there's a lot of changes that are positive nowadays opposed to before, where they didn't have as many regulations and rules. I see a lot of change for the environment, like the impact of logging is having a smaller and smaller effect on the lands nowadays compared to previously.
Yeah, absolutely. That's and maybe that's worth following up now, is, that perception, right, in clear cutting and deforestation and everything like that, and sustainable forestry management and techniques. I think growing up, and a lot of people are exposed to those images, right? Media is pretty powerful. It creates a sentiment and awareness, but it also, it informs our perspective on certain practices, certain industries and things like that, which, can be good if there's poor practice and we want to make accountable. But I mean, where things are going well, I think it also, impacts that as well too. with the Indigenous Resource Network, it's really important. We stood it up because, one of the reasons was, there's too much sensationalization of Indigenous participation in resource development. We have activist groups and different specific interest groups that are, blockades and speaking to, forestry initiatives and things like that. Whereas, communities are fully supportive. They're fully engaged in those development decisions. And so, if you had the opportunity, one of the things we recognize, as well-meaning as they are or they're not, if there's self-interest or whatever, we still appreciate that someone cares about us, but it's also important that other interest groups do understand, do respect self-determination and ability of community to decide for themselves. So what would you say to activist groups or interest groups that say they speak for Indigenous communities in regards to responsible resource development? How would you challenge that? How would you assert your self-determination in regards to that?
We haven't really actually had much involvement with activists recently.
Yeah.
Historically, yes, there's been a lot. I definitely agree with the active, like the part of activists do not speak for First Nations.
Yeah.
They might portray like that, or maybe the
Yeah.
media might portray it that way, and the public might think, okay, well, save the trees and manage things better and whatnot, and maybe that's what the Indigenous people want.
Yeah.
I disagree with that. Like for us as Squamish people, we really value our trees, especially the Western red cedar.
Yeah.
We construct our canoes, our longhouses. We have many uses for the bark.
Yeah.
We utilize everything top to bottom.
Yeah.
Even the roots.
Yeah.
You can make baskets out of them. I can understand clear cutting and just over harvesting.
Yeah.
That is an issue. But for us, we try to manage everything the best we can.
Yeah.
So for silviculture, that's tree planting, that's thinning, spacing.
Yeah.
So that is a lot of our kind of like maintenance work.
Yeah.
So like when we harvest the block, we end up planting way more trees than we take.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them, the roots might not take the wildlife might eat some of them.
Yeah.
The deer actually love eating cedar saplings. So you do lose a bit of them.
Yeah.
So we plant way more than we take. There's special times of the year where there's nesting for birds and whatnot, and there's areas and times that we do not harvest.
Yeah.
So I think that's something a lot of the general public and people that aren't familiar with forestry, they might have an idea in the back of their mind that loggers just go out there and pound the ground and wreck everything, and that's, I think the media and movies have kind of given that visualization. Yeah. But for us, like the loggers, like for myself, speaking as a not only as a Squamish Nation member, but like as just a forestry worker in general. Yeah. I care about the land. I care about the wildlife. Like, it's super important to me. Yeah. I would say I'd probably care more so than just, a regular everyday other person. So
yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, because you're not only involved, you're involved in the management of forests, right? And so that's incredibly important. And there's a lot there that is so important, I think, that you said that people need to hear. And, one of the things that it's important to reiterate is that, Indigenous people are, living their values, they're living sustainably and harvesting resources in sustainable ways. And yes, we get portrayed as Indigenous people. I have to tell this story. I've had the opportunity to meet some pretty really neat people from a variety of different backgrounds across our borders. And there's that sentiment, and you mentioned that, when I go and sit there and say, yes, I'm an Indigenous person from northeastern Saskatchewan, this is my experience, this is some of the things I've done, this is, what I believe. I believe, I know the world needs its resources. The demand is there, and I know things need to be done to manage sustainable demand, but at the same time that there's still people, the population's growing, the needs are rising, energy, resources, and so we need to continue to evolve and to be able to develop those in increasingly sustainable ways. And a good way to do that is lean into Indigenous participation in that value system. And you talked about, the importance of proper harvest techniques, and then also in terms of reclamation, all the considerations that go into it, right? But anyway, talking, to different people, they're like, we thought Indigenous people was against development, leave our land alone. It's like, no, I think, and I don't want to speak for every community, but I think generally people are against development that leaves out Indigenous people. We're just against, especially developing in our territories where we can't participate in that practice and inform more sustainable approaches to forestry and other, extractive or other industries. That's what we're against. We're just against not being able to participate in those decisions, not just in, the yay or nay, considering, our rights and everything, but yeah, participating in those decisions. And people are surprised when they hear that, public surprise. There's public surprise to hear that there's people, incredibly capable people in the industry that are practicing sustainable forestry practices, that are engaged in the management of them, and that are also very much grounded in who they are as Indigenous people. And yeah, people are genuinely surprised. So, again, super glad, you're telling us, you're speaking, to this, to our audience in regards to this, because people need to hear that, right? And so need to hear that Indigenous people are very much engaged and capable. We're not just on the shovel at the bottom end of the spectrum. We're all over the place, entrepreneurs and things like that. So that's important to say. So no, I appreciate that. You talked a little bit about, in terms of sustainability and everything like that, but how do you think your values as an Indigenous person show up in the work that you do?
Yeah, I think it's actually really caring about your work, for one, the quality, and also just really understanding and caring about the land that you're working on, the territory, not just showing up for a paycheck, getting paid by the hour, putting that bit of extra work into something, even if it takes you a little bit longer. Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is just managing and seeing what's going on in that territory. We get, there's instances where people are dumping, just construction waste and stuff like that. So, just keeping on top, just being present, monitoring what's going on in the lands, whether I'm working or not.
Yeah.
Like even on my time off, I'm up the valleys, in the Squamish Valley, the Elaho Valley. These are all places very dear to me. So I'm up there, just always keeping an eye on things. This past summer, we had a lot of forest fire issues. We had one large fire in May. So I was hands-on working with BC Wildfire on that fire. And then also we've had a couple smaller fires that could have been a lot larger. And even after we had some massive fires in the Kelowna and interior, we still had people driving up from wherever, could be Washington, could be from the lower mainland, Vancouver area, coming up and starting fires and having a campfire right in the middle of fire ban. Half the province is on fire. It's just, I don't understand some people's thinking. So I actually spent a lot of my free time driving up the valley, and this would be like 7 o'clock in the evening until 2-3 in the morning. Driving to all the, we have many campsites up in the valley, lots of recreational users. And I spent my evenings and nights, early mornings, just driving around, informing people, telling people to put out the fires, this is like very dangerous behavior.
Yeah.
So I felt like I took it upon myself to go do that.
Yeah.
I felt the need to protect the land, protect the people, and also the town, the district of Squamish, because as you know, like forest fires can travel how many kilometers in one day. So it would be just a matter of 2-3 days. The fire could carry from the Squamish, back end of the Squamish Valley, right to town, out to Whistler, and many other areas.
Yeah. See, like, that's super important. You're very much involved in resource development and forestry, but you also very well explain how you deliver on being a steward, right? And so, I think, and then you answered essentially one of the things I want to talk about. How do you reconcile, being an environmentalist and being a steward, but at the same time, being a person engaged in resource development, right? And so I think you already answered that. What do you think, pivoting a little bit, in terms of the industry and the forestry industry, what do you think some of those threats are to the industry, and how could, Indigenous business or Indigenous leadership help address some of those issues in the industry?
So like I mentioned, wildfires, that is the biggest threat right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like currently, this winter, we've had pretty much zero snowfall.
Yeah.
So that's going to affect our snowpack for the coming months in the summer.
Yeah.
So not only are we going to run into an early fire season if we don't get more snow and cooler temperatures, we're also going to be running into like drought conditions here in town.
Yeah.
So that's one of the immediate and like the hardest threats, and that's something that you can't control.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a challenge in itself.
Yeah.
The other challenge for forestry right now is the market. So the market for all the logs, every species has a price tag to each one.
Mm-hmm.
Red cedar being the highest value, then Douglas fir, and then everything else is basically kind of smaller. So just the price in the market, the demand also, everything's kind of a wait and see. You got to go kind of week by week. You never know what you're going to run into in forestry. There's a lot of ups. There's also probably more downs.
Yeah.
So currently right now we're running into kind of like a lull in the log market.
Yeah.
So low demand, low log prices. And then also on the other side of the market is your taxes. So in forestry, it's called stumpage.
Yeah.
So the stumpage has been just rising increasingly steady over the past few years, which it usually does. And the log prices are going down. So it's kind of hard to juggle both of those things and make, it's hard to make a buck.
Be profitable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we get this, we talk about media and sensationalization, but, also industry as well too. One of the things we pride ourselves is, telling an honest, real story, not an ideal story. And in our experience, Indigenous relations, industry relations, we always hear this romantic story, right, as it comes from industry. And for better or for worse, there's some really good things, but there's also some not so good things. So tell us, tell me a little bit about your experience, in Indigenous relations. What are some of the warts, but at the same time, what are some of the things that are, industry is really moving along in this regard as well too?
Yeah. So for me, it's been, the way I see it, our company currently has a lot of struggles with carrying out the work ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the capacity like the workforce, operators and experienced workers.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the equipment that we have.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I see we're lacking a bit.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping we can turn that around. Currently, all of our harvesting is contracted out to a non-nation company.
Yeah.
So that's where I'd say it's been hard as an Indigenous led company. But I can't say historically it was ran by non-nation
Yeah.
managers.
Yeah.
So now it's kind of shifted from the old ways into the new. Like we're looking to innovate forestry through Squamish and Nch'Kay.
Yeah.
We're hoping to expand and eventually have, upgrade more equipment, more training, more experienced workers, and just build on that and be able to perform everything in-house.
Yeah. Yeah. Build that internal capacity, right?
Yeah.
So Roger, in the past, IRN, we've currently we outlined our position on more needs to be done in terms of fighting climate change, forest fires, and protecting, that livelihood that we talked about. One of the solutions that we keep hearing about is hearing about prescribed burning. And so we'd like to hear from someone in the industry, an Indigenous person in the industry. We hear that it's seen as an important method for the ecosystem, but it also culturally significant as well too. And so, can you speak to the impacts that prescribed burning have on mitigating forest fires?
I actually don't have much experience in prescribed burning, but I know some of the communities to the north of us have had a lot of success.
Yeah.
I believe historically we have had like our own prescribed burnings.
Yeah.
The benefits of having the prescribed burning is one, to take out a lot of the fuels, so the fine fuels.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, like you said, for the environment, it brings back like berry bushes and certain flowers, certain plants that are used as medicines. So that's about the extent I know of that. I am interested in prescribed burning, and I think that's something that we could utilize for our territory.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, I love hearing more about it. I think switching gears a little bit, we talked quite a bit about your participation in the industry, but the industry per se, how do you think it's doing on its reconciliation journey in terms of how it includes Indigenous people, how Indigenous people are leading the way in that industry? So,
yeah, for that perspective, I think a lot of nations are getting more hands-on involved, like Squamish Nation, and stepping up to manage our territory, opposed to the past when it was more government directed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think having a say, being able to just be hands-on and just say, okay, like we know it's working, we know there's things that we can change, and then there's some things that we can just totally do without.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, just like coming from an Indigenous person community, I think that it's a positive thing for other Indigenous nations to, if maybe they're questioning, can we get our foot in the door in forestry? Can we, is there other ways that we can utilize some of these resources?
Mm-hmm.
And, I would say, if you're kind of wondering about that, you should maybe look into it and get your foot into the door. There's many Indigenous companies that are consultants that could come in and help get, open the door for you and get some operations going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. We started this conversation, I think, hearing about you and your journey. And I want to come back to that, and maybe we can wrap up there. But, how do you feel, and you spoke well to it, and it was inspiring hearing you speak, offline in regards to, the forestry process and where things start and how things move along. It's especially inspiring hearing, very capable Indigenous people and leaders, very engaged in that space, but more so, how do you think that's your opportunities in the industry, how you've grown, how you've built capacity, confidence, all those things? Do you think they've influenced how you've showed up in community, how you participated in community? You spoke to that stewardship, but do you think there's a link there between those two things?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's inspiring. And so, inspired to hear. We hear that often. So, people speak to the opportunities that they've had, the confidence that they've gained has gave them, a degree of in not just incentive, but has inspired them to go back into community and do things like that. So that's very cool to hear. I think, and lastly, again, it goes without saying, you're a role model, and that's something, that we carry to a degree of, I know personally, I'm actually having trouble with words, and I never usually have trouble with words, and I've always had issue with that. It's such a responsibility, to be that, and for me, hearing your story, I'm not sure how you carry that, but you are an inspiration, to say the least, right? And self-determination and growing in that way. But more so, how would you inspire, what would be your message to people, to young Indigenous people, to pursue a career in forestry?
It's kind of been a rough road for myself, it hasn't been all rainbows and sunshine and really easy things throughout my career. There has been a lot of obstacles, a lot of challenges, a lot of debating. Do I want to stick this out or not? It is a very dangerous and physically demanding industry. So, I think as long as the interest is there, if you commit yourself and you say like, okay, I'm going to start as a chokerman, that's usually the entry level. You're interested in learning how to run a chainsaw, take a chainsaw safety course first, knowing how to file a saw correctly. Yeah. That eliminates a lot of injuries and dangers in the job itself. Then you move up into chaser, so that's working with the rigging crew on towers and yarders. And then also bucking, so processing the logs on the landing or different equipment operations. But yeah, it's for me, it's been, I think, just the perseverance and commitment that, comes within me, like just wanting to be on the land, wanting to work hard. I'm very driven into, just production. Can I get more tomorrow? Can I, it's all about production, truckloads. Like that's what your all the revenue for your forestry company comes from the amount of production each day. So I think, having breakdowns and a lot of BS things that happen, having maybe a tough guy in the crew that's hard to work with, not letting that just eat away in the back of your head while you're working, and then kind of focusing on that, and then maybe something bad happens. Things can go sideways pretty quick. My advice to anyone interested in coming into forestry is try it out. If you like it, then definitely trying expand, try to get more training. Always have an open mind. Not everybody knows everything. I don't know everything. Like all the years I've been out in the woods, I'm still learning things. There's a lot of, there's new things, new technologies. So just basically, if it's for you, then, logging is not for everybody. Just like, maybe mining or, different industries aren't for everybody as well. So it's basically comes down to the individual. If that's what they're interested in, if they want to expand, if they want to learn more, maybe some people try it out just to say that they tried it out, and maybe it's not for them. But it's been a great experience for me. I can't see myself being anywhere else. Working for Nch'Kay, Squamish Forestry, being hands-on involved, and like being a representative of Squamish Nation in the forestry sector has been, I'd say, another highlight of my success and career.
Yeah, that's incredible. Like, I think there's a lot of things to summarize in that point. First, the pride in Nch'Kay and Squamish Nation and forestry, and being able to participate at a elevated level that comes from, you know, grinding it out. One of the parts that also, you know, people should hear too is there's that honesty. That is quite consistent talking with the Indigenous people, is like there's a real passion for what we do, but it's also very challenging. You know, go into it with eyes open. There's no romantic side to this. If it will check your boxes, it will fulfill you if it's right for you. You know, that's one of the things that we try to encourage, and I try to personally encourage Indigenous people is pursue just try things and pursue things, and you'll never know what you love unless you try different things and find out. And it's obvious your passion for forestry, you know, certainly comes through. And, you know, I hope that resonates with people, that, you know, there is an opportunity there for those who want it, and go into it with eyes wide open with those challenges and invest in yourself. But also that could mean an incredibly fulfilling career where you get to go back to community, take those skills back to community, and, you know, serve the community in that one way. I was going to wrap up there, but there is something that drawn out, and it's another thing that keeps, you know, showing up in all the conversations that we have, is that, you know, you went down that path, and, you know, you're easily could be considered a successful entrepreneur, but you are also compelled to work and serve for community, you know, in line with your own service to your own business and your own, you know, growth and career development. You know, what compelled you? What drives you to want to be able to go back to community, to work for community, to serve in community? You know, why? A lot of people, especially from a Western ideology, say, you know, why would you do that? You know, keep growing your business, make more money, you know, but why would you want to, you know, serve community and go back and do that work? So
I think serving community gives me more of a sense of pride and accomplishment.
Yeah.
I've been given a lot of opportunities and had a lot of help over the years from people, and you know, within the community, nation and non-nation as well. So I just want to acknowledge and put my hands up to everyone who's helped me over the years. Sorry, I forgot the question.
No, that's okay. No, you nailed it, like right off the onset. There's an intrinsic value. There's something that drives us. There's, you know, we're fulfilled. People are fulfilled in much more meaningful ways than just building out, you know, our bank statements and things like that. There's much more than just making money. There's the, you know, the values economy. I think we've heard earlier today. And delivering on that and giving back to community. You know, community wealth versus individual, and so, you know, those themes run through in your words, and so, no, I incredibly appreciate that response. Well, I think we've taken up around that hour of people's time, and then of course your time, and I think this is a good place to wrap up. But thank you again for joining us today, and thank you for, you know, inviting us into this wonderful, beautiful territory, and being able to explore a little further in terms of the impact the resource industry can have with, you know, good Indigenous participation. And you're certainly an inspiration and a role model. And, you know, I wish you nothing but the success, and our end wishes you nothing but success in all your future journeys. So thank you, Roger.
Hi, Nch'Kay. Thanks for coming up with your team, and it's been a great opportunity and much appreciated.
Absolutely.
Hi, my name is Roger Lewis. I'm a proud member of the Squamish Nation. I've been working in the forestry sector for 25 years, and I'm proud to be a part of the Indigenous Resource Network.